Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners work session agenda for Tuesday, September 18th. Again, it's a courtesy if you have a cell phone or BlackBerry, please turn it off, put it on vibrate. Appreciate it if you can just double check. And with that, members of the board, in front of us this morning, we have the work session meeting minutes of September 11th, 2012. Entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes with one small correction on page 5 under Commissioner items. 5th paragraph down. Second to last sentence says she voted against MACO supporting Senate Bill 236. She voted, what I would like to change that to is she voted against MACO supporting with amendments Senate Bill 236. So just the addition of two words with amendments.
You get a second?
I have a change. Page 4 on the.
We have a motion on the floor.
Okay, I would like.
We need a second.
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
Commissioner Burwell, did you have a suggested change?
Yeah, first and second. So.
All right, on the bulleted items on page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The 11th one down. Horses were not seized. The owner relinquished them. It was the custodian, is what was reported to us.
So we have a first and second for those two.
I accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion.
First and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And also in front of us, we have the closed meeting minutes of September 11th, 2012. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve. We have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Fiorelli is here this morning, Chesapeake Utilities, to provide an update to the board on recent gas infrastructure installations in Cecil County. Vince, you want to come forward? Sure.
Come on up, David.
Sure.
This is Richard Cleveland. He's our gas operations manager for our Northern Territory. Morning.
We'll speak into the mic so people in the audience can hear.
Okay, good morning, commissioners. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of Cecil County. Commissioner Hodge had lately requested that we get together for this meeting. We see each other on a monthly basis in the economic development meeting for Cecil County. He requested that we provide an update of where our natural gas projects stand for the community and what our future holds with the project. So I have some notes, just some brief information. Of course, it's not etched in stone, but these are the approximations that we have. I'm sure everyone has noticed there has been work ongoing on Route 40 from the Delaware to Maryland state line through Elkton, right up to Nottingham Road and Route 40 now. That is being handled by our subsidiary called Eastern Shore Natural Gas. They are our transmission company that handles the high pressure transmission lines. They are just about complete for City Gate Station, and we anticipate that they will be finalized in October of this year. After which point, we will then take over and provide distribution lines throughout the county to customers, residential, commercial, industrial. In order to do so, we still need to finalize some franchise agreements. We are currently working with Northeast And we owe the town some comments on the draft franchise agreement that we anticipate having that finalized mid-fourth quarter of this year. Charlestown, we will be renewing franchise agreements, excuse me, with Charlestown with the intent of finalizing an agreement in the first quarter of 2013. And with current, we are currently reviewing and evaluating some economic models with existing commercial and industrial customers in Cecil County along Route 4. And once again, we are continuing to work with easements with some of these customers on our proposed routes. We do not have a set route at this moment. We are still observing all of our options to take a look at what we have. So, the project is underway, and we are moving forward. Any questions, sir?
How far are you down 40? You got out of the gate pretty quick up here.
Exactly. Well, we have not started installation of any distribution lines, but the gate station will be finished in October, and that's right at the split of Nottingham Road and Route 4. So the construction that you see in that little triangular section just before the ATK plant or entrance is where the gate station will be situated.
Just add a little bit to this. Actually, we should have gas on that line, the transmission part. Hopefully, by October. One piece we were waiting for was the permitting on the contract. So we've actually taken that now. So once that takes place, it will be much after that. We're actually looking to run down to the Mechanic Valley Road from the gate station, and hopefully we will have that in place, gas and the customer on and what to do also is my business card, because I'm trying to be on the front side of what's taking place instead of the back side. So, if you don't mind.
When you say the city gate station, that's where the high pressure line is regulated down to a distribution pressure through the rest of the system?
That is correct.
And how far down Route 40 do you intend to go?
Our territory with Cecil County will be just would be west of Principio Office Park.
When do you think you'll reach that park?
I cannot give a time frame at the moment, but depending upon, I would anticipate within the next 2 to 3 years, and give or take, depending upon the amount of customers that we decide to tie to the natural gas.
Now, you mentioned that you're going to go up Mechanics Valley, or you have, you're going to go up to the blacktop plant in Mechanics Valley?
That is one of the routes we are anticipating, yes.
You have a projected timeline for that?
We are still working on easements, obtaining some easements with some folks on Mechanics Valley, so depending upon when that gets.
And what about 272 north up towards Bayview and
Oh, sir.
College?
Yes, we're looking at that for a possible phase 2 of the project.
Will you get there before the new math and science building's built?
We would hope so. As I mentioned earlier, we are finalizing our franchise agreement with Northeast. So once that's taken care of, then we can proceed accordingly. We have every intention to head north, and of course also include Cecil County Community College.
Thank you.
No, I just appreciate the update. We occasionally get questions about what's going on. I'm very pleased to see the direction we're going in. I appreciate the contact information as well.
Thank you all. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Mr. Trolio?
President, members of the board. I'm going to do two brief updates today, and I will make every attempt to make them brief. My first one is on transportation, in the tradition of trying to keep the board alert to any changes, either significant or in this case incremental, about any changes that we're doing with our transit program. Each year we do a survey as part of our public transportation system. That survey this year yielded several things. One of them was a desire to have expanded hours as well as Saturday bus service for our existing Perryville route. In addition to that, in June of this year, we conducted focus group sessions, of which transportation was one of the key areas that we had solicited information from. The results of that yielded several different things, one of them being obviously the desire to expand transportation, but again supported the idea of expanded hours for our transportation program as well as Saturday and or Sunday hours for some of our routes. What we're proposing here is to add a Saturday route to our already existing Perryville bus route. In fiscal year 2012, we were able to see a 22% increase in fare retention, which equates to about $18,000+ in our operating cost. What we're going to do is utilize that, or propose to do is utilize the funding in order to create a Saturday route, which you see before you are essentially three plans. One of them would have the route all day Saturday. The second one would have the route actually in the morning hours, taking a break during what we would consider the down time, and then again picking up the route in the evening hours, and that would be to accommodate individuals commuting to and from work. And last one, the most basic of the plans mirrors our already existing Glasgow route. There are a couple things that we're looking to with this, and one is we presented before you cost associated with what it would be per month, what it would be annually, as well as what it would be from what we project to be the starting point of this, and that would be November of this year. So it would be for an 8-month period. Generally, what you would do as part of a standard is inundate the community with one particular route to see how it works, and then you assess it after a 3-month period. So in other words, if we were to go with the first route that is throughout the day, if that wasn't working, we reduce it to the second plan and subsequently to the third plan. And lastly, what we're trying to do is part of our job access reverse commute grant that will be due later this year, we're writing into it this Saturday route to help in essence support it, which could provide up to 50% cost support to this. So that would be in addition to the money that we already have in surplus funding for our operating. And the reason for that is because, again, we see this being crucial to provide people transportation to and from work on Saturdays in Perryville.
I assume that you've had inquiries about the demand or the need for this?
Yes.
Did you, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but where's the extra money going to come from to pay for the Saturday route?
We had $18,000 in surplus that we project for FY13, and that's because our fare retention for FY12 had increased 22%. So we anticipate seeing the same thing for 13. Now again, we will assess this on a quarterly basis to make certain that we're seeing the same amount. And we also can look at the fact that our JARC route, I think, is really starting to hit its feet. We're seeing consistent increase in the number of individuals riding that route, which again spurs or bolsters our Perryville route.
Mr. Trolio, you've got 3 different scenarios here. If I understood it correctly, you're going to start with the first one?
We would start with the most detailed plan, Commissioner. So the largest one would be from the early morning hours to the evening hours, and the purpose of that is, as part of a standard, you sort of inundate the community with the most extensive route. See where you are after 3 months. If it's not working after 3 months, you reduce it subsequently. And then if that one did not work, we would reduce it further to what would mirror the Glasgow route. The idea of it being to accommodate those individuals going to work in early morning hours and those in the evening hours, bring them home.
So you're anticipating this to be cost neutral then?
Yes, I am anticipating that. And just as a safety net, we're incorporating into our job access reverse commute grant this coming November to incorporate this Saturday route into there. And this was after speaking with Maryland Transit Administration. And the purpose of that is again, something to attempt to supplement whatever cost that we have associated with it. And we'll have the ability to assess it, as I said, on a quarterly basis.
We know transportation is one of our biggest challenges in Cecil County, so I'm delighted that there's something here that can address that.
Thank you. The next update is the Maryland access point. If anybody recalls at our budget hearing, I spoke briefly about this statewide initiative, and indulge me, I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I at least want to give a summary of what Maryland access point means. At a state level, when we look at the disbursement of funding, be it Medicaid and Medicare, Medicaid is oftentimes associated with low-income individuals, medical assistance for families, disability income, and of course, long-term nursing care for both the aged population and those with disabilities. Medicare associated with those that are aged 65 and over. It also goes to those who are disabled after a 2-year period of being on disability income. So if you're on Medicaid for a 24-month period, you will convert to Medicare following that period of time and could likely remain on it throughout the course of your life. So information regarding senior health insurance programs and a variety of other health insurance programs associated with Medicare will be necessary, the information for these populations. Now, fast forward to about 1999. We have the Waiver Act coming in. It's enacted in Maryland. The Medicaid waiver program essentially dictates that Medicaid funding that I just spoke about that goes towards long-term nursing care, those individuals that are in nursing care facilities, both seniors as well as the disabled population, and those that qualify for care, there's a certain cap limit that can be spent on these individuals per year. It's roughly $73,000, $74,000. What this waiver program allowed was those individuals that both qualify and those that are in nursing care facilities to move back into the community and be surrounded by what's considered long-term support services or community-based support services. And the drive behind this was very simple: lower cost associated with Medicaid dollars. So this program, as it's moved forward, has been reauthorized or amended on a couple of occasions. One of them, to accommodate the waiting list for individuals, created a clause that was called money follows the person, and that was essentially the money was going to follow the individual that was in the nursing home, outside of it, and into the community regardless. We have been running this program, as you might recall, at our budget hearing. It changed to a fee-for-service this particular fiscal year, so it's now reimbursable. And I'm happy to say it's doing quite well for us financially. When we look at this idea behind Maryland Access Point, at the state level, it is a partnership between the Department of Aging, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the Department of Disabilities, and to a much lesser extent, the Department of Human Resources. And what it's doing is providing enhanced information and assistance to not only the senior population, but also the disabled population. The efforts behind this is sort of a piggyback on Medicaid waiver program. What do I mean by that? If that money follows the person for those individuals that are in the nursing homes or qualify, this is trying to target those individuals before that even happens. Start to refer those people to community-based services, to in-home services, to medical services before the need arises for them to be in a nursing care level facility. That's essentially what the goal behind Maryland Access Point is. To show you how, I don't want to say important this initiative, but how much it's getting backing from both the state, the federal government, all of the 4 agencies at the state level cabinet that I just spoke of all fall under, at the federal level, the Department of Health and Human Services. The Administration on Aging, the Office on Disability, and the Administration for Developmental Disability recently this past spring have merged into one particular agency, and it's called the Administration on Community Living. And it is to further this initiative. It's to further the idea of Medicaid dollars, of reducing the cost of Medicaid dollars for long-term care and nursing care facilities and put it back into the community. 2 reasons. Obviously said cost, and second is the growing number of seniors that we are anticipating or projecting over the course of the next 15 years. As today we've entered this year we've entered the first year of the baby boomer population. Now, what this means for Maryland is a potential 2% match or increase, additional match in Medicaid dollars for Maryland, if they stay within a certain range. That range means that they cannot exceed a certain percentage of funding to go for nursing level care. They're within that range. And what they need to have done is that the 19 area agencies on aging within the state of Maryland must incorporate some aspect of this MAP program, or what's called an Aging and Disability Resource Center. And that's where we're at today. We have grant funding as a result of the cost savings. Maryland was just awarded an additional $2.3 million in grant. And what this would be for is to provide us with this funding to launch this initiative. We have received $100,000 in grants that I'm proposing to use toward 2 positions. One would be an Aging and Resource Manager, Disability Resource Manager, and the other one would be an Information and Assistance Specialist. This is 100% grant funded, and these positions would be 100% contractual. There is no match associated with it, and it's 100% federal money.
Any questions?
Is this a request to add 2 positions in the future?
No, this is an update on the program prior to me coming in to request 2 positions for the program.
But you're laying the groundwork.
I am laying the groundwork that I wanted. And I will say this, whatever people's perceptions are of this particular program, I want to be crystal clear on one thing, and that is that I'm not necessarily, I'm cognizant of the fact that if there's money out there, we pursue it. But sometimes you don't pursue every bit of funding that's out there for your ability to manage it. My fear of not doing this, and I say this, I use the analogy that just because we abstain from eating chocolate doesn't mean Hershey's going to stop making it. My fear of not taking this money or not utilizing this award is what could happen down the line. The federal government is aligned with this, the state government is aligned with this. My fear is that somebody is going to have to do this. This is going to be pushed forward, and my fear is that it could fragment what we're already providing. I've already described this as sort of a piggyback on the waiver program, enhanced information and assistance, a piggyback on our senior care program. A variety of our long-term care programs right now, in essence, are connected to this initiative, very much so. We're already providing information to some of the disabled population regarding health insurance, regarding homeowners tax credits, regarding renters tax credits. If we were not to seize this opportunity, my fear is the attempt to try to fragment the already existing programs we offer. And the problem that lies with that is those programs are largely funded by Older Americans Act Title III funding, which stipulates that they have to be managed by a local area on aging agency. So we would be in a position where we would potentially lose funding, yet still have to administer these programs without the existing funding we have, and it would destroy the continuity of what we're trying to do. So I present that with the way that it's not about what we stand to gain, it also is about what we could stand to lose, the combination of the 2.
And it sounds like there's a great deal of opportunity in that the federal government is moving towards sustaining, providing support care before they go to the nursing home, that this area is only going to grow.
Yes.
Hence, your department should grow in the future.
Our department, as I look at this, our department is going to assess this. What I want to make certain with this initiative is that it's tailored to Cecil County. That we're not basing this on what Baltimore has done, what Howard has done, what Allegheny, Montgomery has done. That if Cecil's going to do this, we're going to have to make certain that our partnerships and relationships with other agencies that serve these populations continues to grow. Now, if this appears to be successful and we see a large number of individuals and we start to look and assess from a community standpoint how many of these services are necessary and we point them out and try to develop them, it doesn't necessarily mean that our department would grow, because I always look at the fact that government's responsibility could be to facilitate some of these, to manage the money and make certain that we're not competing with what I would call our nonprofit, other nonprofit agencies, if it were for direct service provision. So right now we're at the stage where I would say, let's assess what's needed, let's look at the numbers that we would be serving and make certain that we identify barriers to getting these people the information that they need, and it's certainly looking at efficiencies. So if DSS serves them, if the health department serves them, let's make certain that we're creating a streamlined delivery of services for them to get in there, whether it be for meal service, whether it be for medical services, outpatient, transportation, anything within the community or what would be considered in-home services.
So it's a wonderful opportunity to provide our senior citizens the needs for the future, and you're on the cutting edge. I appreciate that.
Well, we hope so. And there's still a lot of work that has to be done, but this is an interesting initiative that we sort of, we're one of the last counties to sort of jump on board with this at this point.
Sounds like you're getting out in front of it, if you were the last one to jump on board.
Let everyone else make the mistakes.
I think there was apprehension. I think now we're to the point where it's necessary that we pursue this, but again, I think Commissioner Moore, as you sit on the ex officio member of our Commission on Aging, you know that I intend to proceed with this very cautiously to make certain that if we're doing it right.
I was just going to bring that up. Director Trolio has been advising the Commission on Aging as the pieces of this have been coming together, and I'm very confident that he is exercising a lot of caution, and in fact, he shared his process for reviewing and analyzing the program. And it was something good to be part of, and ultimately he came to the decision that it was, but it was after a lot of research and looking at other models out there and other models for providing services. But not only that, but also looking at where the federal and the state government is going. And what I had asked him to do, and he had already indicated that that was on his mind too, is to track as we go through and we find out more about what this program entails for our community, that we make sure that we're not duplicating services, that we're creating efficiencies there. And that's, we all know that preventive medicine is the best kind of medicine, and keeping people in their homes for as long as possible is less expensive to a community because they don't use the other services outside. So I agree with you. I think there's some really good things here, and I'm confident that you'll be monitoring to make sure it continues to be good.
Commissioner Hodge, to answer your question, yes, in the upcoming weeks, we would be coming forward with the request to fill 2 positions.
That are grant funded.
Yes, 100% grant funded.
And that's what I heard, was that there's a great deal of federal dollars and state dollars that are going to be applied.
We're told right now that the funding is in place till at least the close of 14, possibly longer. So again, I think I have said to Commissioner Moore, I, on a yearly basis, assess this and look for the sustainability of this program. But again, my intent is to base it on need and how successful it is over the course of the first year as this aging and disability resource manager gets on board. My outlook, my hope is that they will spearhead this and look to where mistakes have been made with other counties and look to where successes have been gained.
I'm going to ask a question, and I'm not sure if any of this applied to this transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there money that will follow patients when they're back at home for transportation if they, does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, and what you see before you is related to specifically our fixed route transportation, which is a separate pot of money. We also have what's called demand response transportation that is to seniors as well as disabled individuals. So what I'm interpreting is that you're speaking about that money that would be specifically for the disabled and or senior population. And we fully intend to still pursue that and align that with wherever we're going with this goal. And when you look at what is considered the sort of staple of these MAP programs, when we talk about the idea of in-home versus community-based, part of community-based service incorporates transportation. So.
Very good, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have the stormwater maintenance cost recovery, Director Flanagan, Treasurer Field.
Good morning, Commissioners. With me to my immediate left, of course, is County Treasurer Bill Feely, but there's a new face at the table here. I'd like to take this opportunity to formally introduce you to Cordell Willen. Cordell is our new Chief of Development Services Division. He started work not yesterday, but a week ago yesterday, and is busy getting up to speed. To my immediate right, of course, is Van Funk. Van has been the acting Chief of Development Services Division for the last, month or two, while we went through the recruitment and selection process. But his full-time day job, of course, is as Chief of Sediment and Stormwater Management Branch within Development Services Division. As was noted, the next topic on your agenda, stormwater maintenance cost recovery. You hopefully will recall recall, about a month ago or so, Van and I think Sean McCandless of Development Services Division staff appeared before you to show you some draft letters, some draft brochures, as well as a flow chart to talk about the process by which the county will go about attempting to enforce the requirement that stormwater pond owners maintain those, but then what happens if they don't? There are provisions in here whereby the county could step in and perform the maintenance and repairs and then recover the costs from homeowners. And I thought we had a good discussion about some of the mechanics of the process, and you gave us some good feedback with regard to the brochures and the letters, and Cordell and Van and their staffs are in the process of making those changes that you requested, and I think within the next week or two we'll be done with that work and we'll be ready to show that to you again. And once you give us your final blessing on those products, then we'll send out that first batch of letters to those stormwater pond owners who have some work to do on their ponds. But we didn't plow through every single box on this flow chart, but the last box down here in the lower right-hand corner says that after we go through all this procedure, and in case the Department of Public Works has to gets the authorization from the Board of County Commissioners and actually has to go and do the work, and this very last box in the lower right corner says that DPW forwards the cost data to the Treasurer's Office to begin the collection process. But we didn't really have an opportunity to explore the details of that collection process at all. And in retrospect, and after consultation with Mr. Feely, we concluded that it is a good idea and necessary for us to share with the board and get the board's buy-in for how that is going to work, since that's obviously going to be of keen interest to any residents who are subjected to that process, of course. So that is our purpose here this morning, is just to share with you a little bit our thinking with regard to how the county would go about recovering the costs that the county incurs in the event the county has to step in and do maintenance and repairs to stormwater facilities. So hopefully I've teed that up well for you, Bill, and take her away.
Put it through the Well, first, under the County Code, Section 251-23C, the last couple sentences on there says, the owners of the facility may be assessed the cost of the work and any penalty. This may be accomplished by placing a lien on the property, which may be placed on the tax bill and collected as ordinary taxes by the county. So with that premise, we're working on trying to figure out how to appropriately bill the customer, for lack of a better word, the person whose stormwater management pond has been affected and the county has to do the maintenance. We would get the cost information from the Department of Public Works, and we will calculate out, based on the number of homes serviced by that stormwater management pond, what the cost per each house is. And my thought is that we probably should cap the cost that we bill per year. And my feeling was capping at $500 per year. Because in theory, you could have a stormwater management pond that serves a very few number of homes because of the way the development is. And the cost could be, say, $2,000 per home just because of the way it works out. I didn't think that was really fair to hit the homeowner with a $2,000 bill on their tax bill for that 1 year. So I was recommending that we break that down and we just bill $500 a year till we recover the cost. For doing that, I think that the homeowners also need to be assessed some sort of an interest rate on that. So my thought on that was, at the time we get the information from the Department of Public Works on what the total cost was, we would then look at the last bond issue that the county went through, and whatever interest rate we paid on that bond issue would be the interest rate that we would charge those homeowners for that, carrying that money on the stormwater management. So again, if it's $2,000 total cost, including that interest at whatever the interest rate would be, we would then bill them $500 a year for 4 years on their tax bill. Question?
I would propose another flow chart within the collections area of this project. And I agree that citizens should be given the opportunity, if they choose, to pay installments. But in some cases, they may want to pay the whole amount.
Oh, sure.
It's up to them. So in my mind, there's going to be those that are going to willingly pay it as it's proposed, and others that are going to want installments, and others that aren't going to pay at all.
Right, well, on letter 7, which is part of this flow chart, sends out to the homeowner what the costs are and what their share of the costs are. So they could, when they get letter 7, I mean, they're certainly free to write a check and pay us. The collection side of this and add it onto their tax bill is just our means of being able to collect the money that the county has expended on their behalf.
Please keep in mind there may be additional costs or underages or overages when the work is done. I think when the initial letter goes out, it's going to make a proposed number, but when the job is done, it may end up being less, more or less.
Right, well, that's what letter 7 is. That's the final letter that shows the actual costs that were incurred on the project.
Now, one more thing about the interest rate. I do believe that there should be a little bit more than our cost for the administration of this effort. There's going to be time and effort spent by county employees and others to collect this money. So not that I want to make money. I don't think the government wants to make money off this effort, but we should recover our cost and most cover. Right. And so there should be some increase in the interest rate over what we pay to cover those overhead expenses.
Should we do a calculation? Because I thought that was part of what we would be getting from Public Works was.
No, I'm talking about the administration of the installment fund. If you get a bill if you pay your insurance bill in installments, you're going to pay more than if it was just paid lump sum. There's always some administration fee or an additional interest rate. So, obviously, I want to be very fair and very reasonable, but I do believe that we should charge, and I'm not speaking about the cost of the construction. There should be some administration fee built into that also. But as far as, if we're here today talking about the collection part of it, I think there should be some type of fee or interest rate increase to cover those administration fees.
That's all. Pretty much figured out that over in.
Well, fortunately, the cost of doing that is pretty low because all we do is the tax bill is set it each of those properties in a special taxing district. So once we set it up one time, we'll just continue to advertise it out until it's over with. So it's a one-time cost of setting it up, and then it goes out on your tax bill. So it's no additional work on our side, just the initial setup of that dollar amount that needs to be billed out to those customers for whatever period of time. And our software can take care of advertising that out when it gets down to zero or stops bill.
If the cost is accurately very low, I wouldn't want there to be hidden costs added to it that wasn't justified. And with the lien, that's not going to go into someone's escrow where they're paying their taxes.
Yes, that would go into the rest.
Okay, so their monthly payments would be increased to reflect the added cost
That's
of
correct.
okay.
That way they wouldn't have to come up with that additional money at the end of the year. But I was concerned about sending out too big a bill to the homeowner in 1 year that it's not feasible to think that somebody could afford to spend $2,000, $3,000, whatever that cost may be in 1 year. I think it's only fair to spread that over some period of time. I think the homeowner needs to recover, or the county needs to recover the costs as quickly as possible, but not at the expense of hurting the taxpayer so that, potentially they can lose their house to tax sale or something else because of this. So that's why I was just thinking $500 a year. That seemed to me like it was a reasonable number, roughly $50 a month.
So they would have the option as well to pay it off early.
Absolutely. And if they paid it off early, the interest that I was talking about charging, whatever our last bond rate was, they wouldn't pay that because that's the interest that's going to be added to their account each year in order to cover the carrying cost of the money. So if they pay it upfront, then there will be no interest or finance charge on that.
So on letter 7, it'll show the actual cost
Right.
you've gotten from contractor and how much it's gonna cost to repair it. It would be nice that we could show them the cost of how much estimated it would be for them to do it on their own. But that would be their responsibility to
Right.
research.
Well, again, once they receive letter number 7, it shows exactly what the cost and everything is. You know, they'll have an option to pay that, but certainly if they contact our office, we'll tell them what the payoff amount is at that point. Or this is how much it's gonna cost you each year over whatever period of time. Because again, it's a calculation we just do one time, and that's what it is.
This may be a question that can't be answered at this point in time. But I'm gonna ask it anyway, because I'm trying to get my arms around how much might be possibly assessed to an individual should they not make the improvements or corrections themselves, and they end up going through this process. Do we have any feel for what these stormwater fixes are going to cost? I guess it's dependent on the project, the scope, a lot of other factors we simply don't know.
Right, well, the other thing that you have to factor in is how large is the development, so how many houses are you spreading that cost over?
Right.
And that's a number that, in a hypothetical situation, it's not possible to tell you what that number is, because one, we don't know what the cost is, how bad is the pond, how much needs to be done, and then how many houses are affected by that pond.
Well, and so you came up with roughly a 4-year repayment?
Well, no, I was just figuring $500 a year.
Okay.
And I was using a hypothetical that if the repair costs $2,000 because of and again, hypothetically speaking, it's a pond that costs $10,000 to fix. There's 5 houses that are served by that pond. It's $2,000 a house. I think to charge a homeowner $2,000 in 1 year puts an undue burden on that homeowner. So that's where I was suggesting that we spread that money out over time. And my number came out that I thought was a reasonable number, and it's strictly my opinion. $500 a year, I felt like was a reasonable number that if you had to pay to have that replaced, you should be able to afford $500 a year over whatever period of time. So if it's a large development, the same pond, it costs you the $10,000, but there's 500 houses that are served by that, well, it's just a one-time fee and $50 and it's all over with.
I guess my concern, well, what my concern is that for some folks, $500 a year is a lot of money.
I understand that, but
And
the county also needs to be paid back. And remember, last year in the budget, the commissioners put up seed money of $100,000 to get started on this. So one of the things that we need to do is, if we've spent this money fixing ponds, we need to get the money back in to replenish that $100,000 fund so that we can go back out and fix more ponds. So we need to recover the money as quickly as we can so that the fund keeps getting replenished. Otherwise, we'll have to keep coming back every year asking for more money, and that's not what the intent of this is.
And I understand that. I just know that there's a number of citizens in Cecil County that aren't even aware they're part of a homeowners association, and this is going to come as quite a shock. And I'm just trying to anticipate all of what we're going to encounter and how best to deal with that.
Well, I think that if you go through this flow chart, the homeowners will know in the very beginning that they are part of a homeowners association, whether that association is an active one or it's a defunct one. Early on in the process, they will know that they're part of a homeowners association that's responsible for a stormwater management plan. And that's going to happen early in this process. They're not going to find that out all the way down here at the end.
Well, Van, how many homeowners associations do you think are not active, or that the members are going to be shocked that they're a part of this and they have to pay?
Unfortunately, I think the majority of developments that on paper have homeowners associations are not active. whether that's 50% or 80%, I don't know. But I know when we go out into communities and do inspections, and talk with homeowners as we do our inspections, the vast majority are unaware of their responsibilities for stormwater maintenance. And that will be part of our goals and part of our roadblocks is to educate as we go along, to make sure people understand what's in their community and what their responsibilities are towards care.
What has been your feedback for those people that you've encountered so far? Have they been indignant, rebellious?
It ranges, it runs the whole gamut, but for the most part, once we go through and explain what's there and why, it's all about getting buy-in. They understand, and we've had fairly good success on getting ponds cleaned up as we go along. But it's the ones that are just vegetation. It's not the ones where it requires structural fixes. Those are more expensive. It's not something a homeowner can just go out and do with a chainsaw on their own. So it's the bigger fixes that are the most problematic.
And those were 17% you anticipated of all the stormwater management plans?
Roughly, that's the number that need major repairs. Yes.
And do you feel like the letters are adequate in showing the homeowner the options available?
I do. I think if we get a response, and when we move past the letter where we send out the initial notification, we offer to go out and meet with the homeowners at the site with their plans to show them what's been approved, to describe how it's supposed to function. So I think we give ample opportunity to try to educate everyone along the way. And I think that the way it's laid out, the process is laid out, I think we'll be successful in it. And hopefully we won't have to move that, the letter 7 where we're already done the work. The hope is that as we go through, we identify issues, we explain the issues, and we try to get some buy-in from the owners that these things that are in their community, they can be an eyesore, but they can also be an amenity if they take care of it properly.
The planning commission met yesterday, and Mr. Wallace, who's been before us, relaying his desire that this be implemented, requested an update. So if DPW could send something to planning and zoning. Ms. Cordell, you were there? Yes, thank you.
You want us to direct it to,
Jennifer Bacon, and she can relay it to all of the commission members. And I let them know that you've gotten the pamphlets together and the flow chart, and very pleased with the effort that's been put in. So, one last question with the $100,000 seed money. I still have some heartburn over that, but what kind of accountability or that we'll be able to review how this money is being spent? Is there going to be put into place?
I would certainly think normal budget and accounting will provide all that information. I didn't have any special, unless Scott does in Public Works.
Well, per our earlier discussion, the flow chart does include the Department of Public Works coming back to the Board of County Commissioners to seek authorization to proceed with doing the work if all other efforts have failed to get the Homeowners Association to respond. And I think at that point in time, we'll have a good idea of we will know what is needed to be done, and we can then put a cost estimate on that. We will not have solicited contractor proposals at that point, but we should have a pretty good idea of what we think the cost is going to be, and we'll know how many homes are served by that development, so we'll be able to give you an estimate of what that per resident cost is going to be. But I think I would caution the board that if we're going to go down this path, that treating developments consistently, I think, is going to be very important there. So if we're going to do the work and send the bill to one group, I think we need to be prepared to do the work and send the bill to every other group that does not take care of the problem. So in terms of controls, the Board of County Commissioners is going to have the authority to say go or no go, and we'll provide you with that information. I guess if the board so desires, once the work is done, we can certainly come back and let you know what the actual costs were. I guess I would also reiterate a point I've made before, which is that this flow chart is designed for the Board of County Commissioner model and will be obsolete come December 3rd of this year. And I would submit that the county executive and the county council are going to have to decide who wants to be in charge of this program, who wants to be the approval authority for taking action.
I think by
So-
design, it is the county executive being the oversight for DPW. Okay. And then the cost for certified mail would be, one additional item. Then what was some other costs that you had foreseen? The seed money is only for,
That's
doing the repairs, or is this in addition to the flow chart, to the letters going out?
the intent of that line in the Development Services Division budget was to fund actual physical work repairing ponds. The costs of the administrative costs of paper and envelopes and postage and everything that's going to go with sending out multiple letters to hundreds if not thousands of residents is envisioned to be funded out of the Development Services Division's budget. They've got a line in there called postage and office supplies. Now whether we beef those lines up in anticipation of sending out thousands of letters, I'm not sure, but we'll deal with that. If we run out of money in the postage account, then we can do budget transfers and move that around. I would hope the board doesn't feel compelled to manage the number of stamps we're purchasing to send out these letters. That at some point in time you need to have confidence in us that we know what we're doing and that we will fulfill the board's intent.
I was referring back to a discussion that we had previously on the added cost, that you anticipated it'd be a lot more expensive with the new process in place for the certified mail.
There's definitely gonna be increased expense, just in the mail itself. So one development that has 100 people, we have to send certified mail to 100 households. That's a cost that was unforeseen. But I think what Scott has said is that we will meet those with our current budget, and our line items that we have currently. The intent is to take it out of that $1,000 seed money.
Yeah.
If we find that we did not account for all these letters in our previous year, then maybe we have the ability to transfer funds around our existing budget, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
And it's the intent of the Treasurer's Office that we're gonna get the total cost from the Department of Public Works, which will include all those administrative costs and everything else, and that will be added to the project costs and billed out to the homeowners.
Welcome to season.
Yeah, I should have mentioned in the introduction that Cordell comes to us from American Engineering and Surveying, a local consulting firm where he was a longtime vice president. But we're happy to have him on board.
Before we move on, the answer to the question about who's going to sign off on moving forward with county doing the work. And I think Commissioner Broomall said that it appears that the executive should do that, and I support that. Is there anyone that disagrees? Or can we just?
I didn't say they should, I said I anticipate that that's where the responsibility would lie. If anyone has a different answer, I'd like to hear what it is.
To the extent that something has to ultimately hit someone's tax bill, that's going to be the responsibility of the council, because it's their responsibility to levy. As far as that goes, also there's going to be a question of the amount, based on who has the ability to authorize something in some amount, and whether or not it's already approved in the budget. Those are the typical caveats that would occur, whether or not it's an executive or council function. So even if it was in a budget, if it was say $10,000, then that would be something within the responsibility of the executive to take care of. If it exceeded $25,000, which is per the charter, then ultimately, in order to initiate an expense of that nature, the council's going to have to weigh in. That's in the charter.
Yeah, but I think the $100,000 is already in the budget, and the executive has authority to spend the budget as approved. And in my mind, this question of whether or not the Public Works Department moves forward would depend on if the money's in the budget and if the Public Works Department says we need to do this, why wouldn't the executive make that decision?
I think
it seems like it's just carrying out existing law.
Right. And if that budget amount's not sufficient, or they run out of that money, then they'll have to come back to the council for additional money. Or postpone the project to the following fiscal year or something else. But I don't see the need for the council to get involved other than approving the amount of money at the beginning of the budget year.
Well, Mr. Whiteford, did you say that if they're gonna levy taxes on bills, that would be a council function?
Well, at the point that it hits a tax bill, that's where that falls in, never was ultimately levied. But I'm merely speaking to the point of the amount that any executive could authorize. Correct me if I'm wrong, Al, I believe the executive has the ability to authorize certain expenses up to $25,000, if I'm not mistaken.
If it goes beyond if it's a subsequent fiscal year, the council
right,
would have
$25,000
if it's budgeted in the same
right.
fiscal year, the council doesn't get involved.
Right.
So.
As Mr. Feely quoted, the county code currently, gives the county the ability to recover these costs through, through the tax billing mechanism. And I suppose if the county council didn't like that idea and wanted to do it another way, that it could seek to amend the county code to change it to whatever it wanted to change it to. For example, on another point, at the present time, on the flow chart, it says DPW requests BOCC approval / authorization to proceed with completion of maintenance. I guess, come December 3rd, that could read one of two things. It could say DPW requests county executive authorization to proceed, or it could say DPW requests county council authorization to proceed. I think I've tried to point out some downsides to having the council be the approving authority for that. But in my mind, that's up to the council to decide, does it or does it not want to be the approving authority for taking that step. And I think the council gets multiple bites at the apple, one of which is approving the annual operating budget, and to include or not include money in there, the so-called seed money. Another bite at the apple is changing the county code about the rules of the game. And then I suppose if it wanted, it could have a third bite at the apple, which would perhaps prohibit the county executive from spending any money on stormwater pond maintenance without the express authorization of the county council. I would caution against that. But
they have another meeting on council rules, so maybe that's an issue that needs to come up at that time. Why don't we move on to your informational briefing accounting for growth component of the watershed implementation plan.
Right. Thank you, Mr. President. Al indicated to me that some or all members of the board, county commissioners, were interested in having a discussion about this accounting for growth. I think that may have been a spin-off from the Senate Bill 236. tier map discussion. And so Cordell and Van are with me this morning, and we're hoping to take maybe 10 or 15 minutes of your time to just give you a little bit of background about what is this accounting for growth thing all about. So with that, gentlemen.
Well, I guess the question of accounting for growth is what is exactly accounting for growth? How does it relate or not relate to our WIP requirements, or watershed implementation plan requirements? And how does it or does not relate to the State Bill 236, which has been under discussion for quite a while? Accounting for growth, to me, simply stated, is how do you manage pollutants from growth? So as you're all aware, I think you're all aware, EPA set a pollution diet for the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It established a baseline for pollutants that can go into the Chesapeake Bay, total maximum daily load. So we've got a threshold for a pollutant load. When that pollution load was established by EPA, of course, established it for every state in the watershed, and the state actually gave a pollution diet to Cecil County. And what we've been working on for the last year and a half or a little longer is the watershed implementation plan, the phase 2 plan of how will we locally address the reductions. We're at this point, we've got too much nitrogen and pollution, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment in the water. How do we get down to that pollution diet? So we put together a plan that was submitted by the state to the EPA, which says these are the types of best management practices to reduce your pollutant load, and the pollutant reduction level. Our WIP plan, as you recall, we did not submit a massed input deck to the state. The state augmented our plan and decided what types of BMPs would be selected for us to meet those reduction levels. But what we did not account for, or we didn't plan for, and the state had not at the time either, was how do you account for the growth over time? So we have this baseline of pollutant levels. We know how to get down, we think we know how to get down to it. But what happens if you start adding houses and roads, because they're going to increase the amount of pollutants, whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, or sediment. So if we're at a baseline, we add houses with their roads, it's going to increase the amount of pollutants, whether it's from roof runoff, whether it's from the driveways, or whether it's from the on-site septic. And I guess from a concept level, you would think, okay, we're gonna increase our pollutant load, but we've got these strategies and BMPs to address the pollutants. Let's take septics, for example. We add a house at the end of the year. The theory is that it's going to add, if you have a conventional septic system, roughly 10 pounds of nitrogen per year into our water. So your load goes up. If you use a BAT, best available technology, that load per year from that house septic is roughly 5 pounds of nitrogen. So you decrease it to half, but you still got that little gap. And that's what this accounting for growth is about. How do you handle that gap? We've come up with, here's how you get down the pollutant load, but there's always that growth sector. Our WIP plan, as I said, did not mention or account for growth. Maryland's phase 2 WIP plan also did not account for growth. But that's the next phase. That was one of their milestones, was although we're going to establish BMPs to meet our pollutant reductions, we're also going to work concurrently to try to establish how we will account for that growth factor. A couple questions that I would ask looking at this is, okay, we've had a lot of information on State Bill 236. Is that tied into it? And State Bill 236 does not explicitly state, here's how you account for growth. It doesn't set the rules, regulations, and procedures to create offsets for your growth. There are regulations that are in draft phase, which were placed on these websites, I believe, last week, that do set the rules and procedures. And I think I saw that floating around in some of your handouts. That draft for revision to regulations does establish the requirements for offsetting, the procedures to offset nitrogen loads from various sectors. And the state has also put together a offset tool. It's still in the draft phase, but you can go on their website and put in numbers for if you have X amount of houses on this many acres with this much impervious, how much nitrogen, what's your load going to be? And it would create, here's how much you have to offset. I did run through a couple scenarios. I want to pass this out real quick.
Dan, do you think those numbers are accurate?
We've looked at, and there are some things that stand out that may not be, we don't understand the logic for it, but it's not our tool at this point, and we don't know what's behind it. So at this point, we have to take it for what it is at face value. And I wanted to briefly go through what the scenarios I put on here. I wanted to just show how it relates, because again, the State Bill 236 does not say this is how you will account for growth. The draft regulations, however, do set those procedures. So let's look at a scenario where you have just one house. I put it on a half-acre lot. It's something we see all the time in the county. I input the amount of impervious area, pervious area, and what you see with a conventional septic system, if all the way to the right side, you see a total offset. And that gray area, that's how many pounds of nitrogen that have to be offset from the development. So one house on a half-acre lot. So 14 pounds of nitrogen. As you go down through the scenarios, I said, okay, same scenario, one house, half-acre lot, all the same background information. What's the offset if you have a BAT septic system? And as you can see, if you go out to the right, it's 9.2 pounds of nitrogen. Now, if you also address, well, what happens if you connect to a wastewater treatment plant? And of course, it has BNR and ENR level of treatment. Both result in a total offset of 4.3. So just from the very concept level, you can see that if you're connecting to a wastewater treatment plant, your total offset is much less than if you were putting in, or if you're tying into a conventional septic system. Like 4.3 versus 14.1 for a conventional system. Now below that, I put in a specific project, an existing project in the county. It's a real project that had 150 units, 150 houses on 34 acres. I had the numbers for how much would be impervious based on the amount of roads, the general type of house that would be on the lot, sidewalks, how much would be in pervious, what's going to be your grass area, what's going to remain forest. I went through the same kind of scenario. What happens if you're hooked to a wastewater treatment plant? Well, it's ENR or BNR, if there's 150 units, you can see your total offset is 365 pounds of nitrogen per year. If that same 150 houses was hooked to a BAT septic system, it's 1,100 pounds of nitrogen. And the last one, of course, is the conventional septic system, which goes up to 1,844 pounds of nitrogen that will be required to be offset. So again, it goes back to what is the growth? What is allocating for growth? It's how do you handle that 1,844 pounds? And that's, I don't have the answer for you. I just want to point it out. I know that's been a discussion item. Or with AdCom, the advisory committee, we have discussed the allocating for growth in the past, but we have never come to any concrete solutions or recommendations to the board. I think that's probably one of the next things. It's on our agenda again this month, but I think that's going to be one of the big issues that we have to wrestle with to bring to you, or some recommendations on what do we do to account for that difference in here's where our load is now. If we're going to continue to grow, how do you manage the fleet from that growth? Any questions or Darrell or Scott?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment about your examples and scenarios were based on residential development, but this also applies to commercial, industrial, institutional, and anything, basically. So if the county wanted to build a paramedic station someplace, it would impact us, the county. If the school wanted to build a new school or an addition, it would impact the school district. So this is not just development as far as residential. This has a significant impact on the future of Cecil County in any type of construction that we do.
Correct. The one thing that I will add to that, Commissioner Hodge, is that as you read through the proposed revisions, what you will find is that for redevelopment within existing areas, the offset is much less than if it is in an area that is either conventional septic or BAT.
Van, what are the offset mechanisms? You know, what alternatives are there besides BAT, forest buffers?
Well,
or
for septic, it's very limited. You only have a few choices for your BAT. There's not, or tied into a wastewater treatment plant or pumping out once or twice a year. So you have very limited scenarios for your septic. For stormwater, it's the same best management practices that we talked about in the past, whether it's tree line or planting trees or filter strips or stream restoration. It's all those same BMPs. It's a question of where do you apply them, and the big question, which I haven't delved into yet, which is kind of my next task, is how many pounds of reduction do you get for those BMPs?
I would submit that, as Van has noted, you know, you can only get so low using septics, whether it's conventional or BAT, but the environment, you know, a pound of nitrogen is a pound of nitrogen, regardless of whether it comes from septic loading or stormwater runoff. And so it's possible that the requirement could be that a developer, you know, let's just say they're going to do one house for simplicity's sake, would be required to offset X number of pounds of nitrogen, depending upon, is it on a conventional septic, is it on a BAT septic, is it on a wastewater treatment plant? Al's question are, what are the options for offsetting that? They could make the business decision if use of BAT septic is not required, they could make the business decision to go ahead and install one anyway, because that's going to reduce the number of pounds that they're going to have to offset. But then they could be required to go and do additional stormwater retrofit somewhere in order to earn enough credits to offset the impact of their development. That's, you know, that's the policy of accounting for growth. Now, as I read the state's proposed regulation, it attempts to spell out the math by which the required offset is calculated. But I don't see where it says how it's going to be accomplished. And I believe that's where it's going to fall to local jurisdictions to figure that out. And as Van has indicated, we've kicked this around a little bit within the WIP AdCom, but I think the WIP AdCom is the right body to work this problem, and I think the WIP AdCom owes you, the Board of County Commissioners, a recommendation about how to account for growth. At the staff level, you know, we've had some very preliminary discussions, and it seems to me there are kind of two basic models that a developer could be required to go and do physical work, stormwater retrofits, stream restorations, or whatever, in order to earn enough credits to offset the impact of their development. Or alternatively, there could, if the board or county council decided, there could be a fee in lieu program whereby if that developer doesn't want to do it, or doesn't have opportunities to do it, or doesn't think he could do it cost effectively, then they could pay a fee in lieu to some body, the county, for example, that then would take all these accumulated fees and then go and undertake effort on a larger scale that would offset the impact of this development. And what might that be? That might be large-scale stream restorations. That might be stormwater retrofits. And what that means is going into an area of the county where there is not currently any stormwater controls whatsoever, typically developments built before 1984, 86 is the magic number. If a development was built before 1986, there weren't any stormwater rules in place at that time. And so those developments typically have no stormwater controls. And so, you know, this fee in lieu of money could be used to go into an area of the county and implement stormwater best management practices, all intended to offset the impact of this development. Without a requirement that developers offset their impact, that burden is going to fall on the county at large. So that's one of the key policy decisions that a Board of County Commissioners / County Council are going to need to make going forward is, are they or are they not going to require developers to offset the impacts of their proposed development? The state and the federal government probably don't really care who does it. It just has to be done. Now, this draft regulation, you know, the word developer is throughout it. So in the state's mind, you know, that burden should fall to the developer. But you know, I think ultimately, in terms of how this is implemented, you know, on a day-to-day basis, is going to fall, I think, to local jurisdictions to figure it out. Whether it's require them to do physical work, allow them to do fee in lieu, don't give them a choice, make them do fee in lieu. I don't know. I think we with AdCom owe you more work on that, and we owe you some recommendations. But
I think that's wise, because at the end of the day, I can just see these costs continuing down to the point where everybody just throws their hands up.
For the AdCom, the WIP AdCom committee, what I'd like to see is some cost analysis done on how much these offsets cost. I think that's a very important piece of information, not only for the county to know, but for developers. So I'm assuming that you guys have the tools within your toolbox to be able to come up with that fiscal analysis.
Can you break it down? Would you do it per project or per lot? I mean, you did the scenario
Per pound.
Per pound, rather, excuse me, per pound.
There are numbers floating around there. $20 per pound, I think, is out there in the trading market.
Wouldn't that also depend on what remediation is done? I mean, the $20 per pound, it would, if you did the physical work.
That's just fee in lieu.
Fee in lieu, gotcha, okay. But depending on what kind of retrofit you did,
Hopefully
those
it'd be
costs
less.
would be.
Otherwise you pay fee in lieu.
Okay. Good point.
I think Cordell mentioned the word, I left it out, which is trading. You know, that's, in theory, that's an option. You know, a developer could, who's on the hook to offset the impact of their development, could go and purchase or trade credits from someone who has them to sell, whether that's, you know, a farmer or some other entity. But you know, this is a brave new world.
Yeah, it sounded like that's what we had touched upon in the Council of Governments meeting with the towns. John Leoga had talked about the setting up a private market with the farmers selling their nutrient credits that they earn from doing improvements on their property, developers purchasing from them, and it's a private market. I see here that offsets may be purchased from the Maryland Nutrient Trading Program.
I went on that webpage yesterday, to say I don't understand the program, I just looked at it, and that's where the $20 for But it is up there, it is active. I'm not sure how we would start to participate in it.
Well, we Cecil County are actually dipping our toe into that, in that we, the Department of Public Works, have been approached by a mobile home park, a manufactured home community in the county that needs to construct a wastewater treatment plant to replace its on-site disposal system, but it doesn't have, it needs phosphorus credits. In order to do that, we've got excess phosphorus credits, so we are talking to them about a possible trade. They've got excess nitrogen, they need phosphorus. We, at some point in time, if and when we ever expand Seneca Point, we're gonna need nitrogen. We've got excess phosphorus. So it looks like there's a possible makings of a trade there, and we're working that with them at some point in time. That will come before the Board of County Commissioners or County Council for for approval if it gets to that point. But my point is the Maryland nutrient trading market is very immature. There are many states, Pennsylvania included, that are much further along in this than is Maryland, but we are starting to dip our toe into this, and from what we're hearing from MDE, if this deal with this manufactured home community goes through, that could be the first or among the first trades within the state of Maryland.
I would hope that we consider possibly the purchase of TDRs, transfer development rights, as one possible option to offset some of these. Think about it.
So you're looking for direction from us to ask the.
No, this was intended as an information briefing. The word I got was some commissioners had questions about, hey, what's this accounting for growth stuff? And we wanted to come before you and just have a dialogue. Now, this message from Mako, I think is hot off the presses, came out yesterday. It's got a deadline of Friday where Mako is soliciting comments, and I will ask Cordell and Van to take a look at this document and see if what they've got, if anything in the way of review comments, that we will work back up. Whether that takes the form of a letter from the Director of Public Works or the County Administrator or the Board of County Commissioners, I don't know. But the point is, we've got a fairly narrow window here if we desire to submit review comments.
You want to go through them and send us your comments?
Sure, we'll push them back up to Al.
Okay, and then when does your
The next meeting is next Monday, the 24th, but this accounting for growth thing is a fairly complex issue. It'll be on the agenda for discussion, but we're not going to have the answer for you by next Tuesday. It's going to take another month or two beyond that.
I know you're Superman, but I'm not going to stretch it. And no, it just so we get something maybe early October or something, just some ideas to follow up. All this is coming out of digest.
I will acknowledge this is hard stuff, but you might recall that the WIP AdCom had forwarded to the board a recommendation to endorse some changes to some regulations that would require an increased use of the best available technology, and that was, as you can see the numbers here, doesn't get to zero, but it makes the amount of the offset lower. But not only did the board choose not to endorse that, the board actually took a 180-degree position and opposed that. So my point being, this accounting for growth is hard stuff. There aren't any easy answers out there, and at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to bear the cost associated with it, and it's going to fall to you to decide who bears it. Specific developers for specific projects, or everybody?
But ultimately, it's the taxpayers.
One way or the other.
One way or the other.
Okay, so I think the answer was no, we're not, I mean, we always welcome any guidance you care to offer, but we're not here asking any specific questions. This was really intended as an information discussion.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. We have the interim animal control plan update, Ms. Juan, Director Brooks.
Before Richard comes up, and he's going to give an overview of the activity through communications and an overview of some of the calls we've been getting since we initiated the interim plan. We started taking calls on August 29th. As you may recall, the SPCA terminated the contract we had with them for animal control on August 30. So we've been under the interim plan since then. The RFP deadline for proposed vendors for the animal care control contract, the deadline for receipt of those proposals was Friday at 1:30. We received 2 proposals. Currently, I've directed the purchasing office to review those as far as their responsiveness meeting the requirements of the RFP. It's our intention this morning to get confirmation from the board who they would wish to serve in the evaluation process on the evaluation committee. As you know, Richard, myself, Treasurer Feely, Craig, and Eric, as well as Stephanie Garrity, have been involved in the establishment of the interim plan and the development of the RFP. So I just wanted to get confirmation from the board on the composition of that evaluation committee. The timing for the RFP, that there's a really tight timeline as far as the evaluation process. I don't have it in front of me, but today, actually, knowing that the proposals were received on Friday, it's contemplated that today we would determine which of the proposals submitted were responsive. And then we would review, we would start the review process with potential oral presentations this Friday. So I don't know if we'll be able to meet that timeline, but that was the proposed timeline.